And as we allow an infilling of spirit, I invite you to close your eyes, settle back in your chair, feel that spirit fill every cell of your being. As we breathe into this moment of meditation, I invite you to use your power of imagination. Imagine that you have the opportunity to recreate yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Ask yourself, if I could recreate my body, what would it look like? Would I be taller, thinner, stronger? Would I have different color eyes or hair? What would I be wearing? Would I be dressed in the most opulent clothing or the most comfortable? What would my voice sound like? What would I see with my eyes? Would I be smarter, more well-read? Would I be an artist or an engineer or a landscaper or an explorer? For I can create myself to be anything I desire. Would I be a peacemaker or a warrior? A teacher or a student? Or maybe all of the above. Would I be spiritual? Would I realize a deep interconnectedness with God, with all creation, with my fellow humans? Would I see with the eyes of love and understanding and compassion? Would I be calm, peaceful, assured? How would I create myself? In my mind's eye, I behold my new self, perfect in every way, the ultimate achievement of my most profound desires. In my heart, I realize that this is how God sees me. Indeed, this is how I truly am. I am the most perfect expression of God that is mine to be. How empowering it is to know that I am God's perfect expression right now, right here, in this sacred moment, and in all moments. Even in those moments when I forget. As I behold my true self, the creation that God has made me to be, that I am expressing as, I rest in peaceful assurance that I am God's perfect creation. Secure in this assurance, I find that I am now free to behold every other living person as God's perfect creation. Whether they look like me, talk like me, believe like me, or not, I know deep in my heart that we are all God's perfect creation. I recall the words of the teacher, Jesus, who said, "Love one another as I have loved you." I open my heart to love others as I am loved, to see others as I have been seen, to know others as I am known by God. This assurance sets me free from worry, fear, anxiety, allows me to give love and receive love. And for this, I am grateful and I am dedicated. As I say, thank you, God. Amen.
In the velvet darkness of the blackest night, burning bright, there's a guiding star. No matter what or who you are, there's a light over at the Frankenstein place. There's a light burning in the fireplace. There's a light, light in the darkness of everybody's life. The darkness must flow down the river
gosh, that was fun. Thanks, guys. You may be wondering, if you're just tuning into Unity of Joplin for the first time, or Unity for the first time, why in the heck are they playing a song from Rocky Horror? Well, today we like to have fun. We do believe spirituality can be fun and joyful. It can be serious. It can be both. And today just happens to be Mary Shelley's birthday. You may say, Mary Shelley, that name sounds familiar. Well, it should. Mary Shelley wrote the original book, Frankenstein. It was called Frankenstein or the New Prometheus. And Mary Shelley was born on this date in 1797. And she began writing her book when she was 18 years old. She wasn't even really an adult yet. And she started writing this book because she had been traveling through Europe with some friends, one of whom would become her future husband. And one night they were all sitting together talking about literature and writing. And they kind of gave each other a wager. And the wager was to see who could write the best horror story. So Mary Shelley went home. It only took her a few days after she got home to draft the story. She published it a year later. She had to publish it anonymously because in 1797, God forbid, women write a horror story, right? Fortunately, by the time the second edition came out, she was able to put her name on it. But it's not what people think it is. Hollywood made some great movies based on the book, but none of them were really similar to what she wrote. It wasn't just a horror story. In fact, really, it wasn't a horror story at all. It was a deeply moving story. When I used to teach high school honors literature, this was one of the books I really loved using because it has so much depth to it. It's not a book about a mad scientist, really. It's a book about a human being who struggles with who he is and has a vision for something better, but doesn't really quite know how to do it. He's a scientist, and he struggles to recreate himself through his creation. The doctor's name, the scientist's name, is Frankenstein. The monster or the creation or the creature is never given a name in the book. It's not Frankenstein. It's not Frankenstein's monster. It never has a name, and that was very intentional. Because the story is a commentary about the depths of our humanness, our emotions, our past, our experiences, our self-image, and how we show up in the world. In my opinion, as I said, read with understanding, it's one of the most moving and instructional books about the human experience I believe that was ever written. It's filled with incidents of how we see our world through the lens of our own experience and interpretation. And it gives us clues to actions of others that may not be immediately explainable. And more than anything else, it invokes us to a deeper sense of compassion. Metaphysically, the story asks, what are you creating? What are you creating? Have your past creations been ones of beauty or beastliness? Have they been noble or monstrous? And what will you create with the pieces that are left after this modern time we were in of great deconstruction? Because we are all moving to a moment when we will be recreating or creating anew. You know, I say it every Sunday. I say it a lot during the week. I'm going to keep saying it. We are working on creating a new and better normal. What will that look like? We talk a lot about what it'll look like as a culture, as a nation, as a society, but what will it look like for us as individuals as well? So let's take a look at this 200-year-old work almost. Got to do my math. Yeah, a little over 200 years. Math, I taught math, but it wasn't the best thing I taught. Let's take a look at this and how it relates to us today. Let's look at it with the lens of metaphysics that we use so much in Unity. The first chapter is, just kind of an introduction and everything sets the stage. The second chapter is when we really begin to get to know the doctor, Frankenstein. And he wrote this, or he says this in the book. It was the secrets of heaven and earth that I desired to learn. Isn't that what we're doing? He goes on. And whether it was the outward substance of things or the inner spirit of nature and the mysterious soul of man that occupied me, my inquiries were directed to the metaphysical, or in its highest sense, the physical secrets of the life and of the world. That's where he begins. But his experiences would lead him to the very depths of spirit and nature, and they would cause him to confront his own darkness and try to find his own light. As I said, you may think you know the story. By the way, those of you on Facebook and those of you on Zoom, how many of you have read the original book? I knew you would, Lou. Neely and Jeff. Let's see, who all on Facebook? Anybody raising their hands on Facebook? I don't see any yet. But anyway, if you get the chance, I strongly encourage you to read the book. It's a powerful work. Anyway, the basic plot is this. He decides to build a human being. He's experimenting with electricity, which in 1797, was very new. They were beginning to learn things about it. It wasn't too long after Benjamin Franklin had recreated experiment catching electricity with a kite. It was not his original one. He was doing what others had done. But there was an idea that electricity was the power that animated the human being. And if you think about it, our brain runs on electricity. Our spirit, our spirit is energy, which electricity is a form of energy. So they weren't too far off the mark, really. But he decides he's going to build a human being and use electricity to give it life, to animate it. And the being that he built was not the way it showed up in the movies at all. Yes, it was bigger than a normal human being for an interesting reason. He realized that his skills as a surgeon were not good enough to do the very minute surgery of connecting nerves and tissue on a small, normal human-sized body. So he had to make everything bigger because he wasn't adept at surgery. That's why the creature was so big. But the creature didn't look like it did in the movies. It was described thusly. He was an 8-foot-tall, hideously ugly creation with translucent yellowish skin, so taut over the body that it barely disguised the workings of the arteries and muscles underneath. It had watery, glowing eyes, flowing black hair, black lips, and prominent white teeth. But as it became alive, once it was animated, it was innocent, like a child. The brain was not taken from a criminal or anybody like that who had died. If you remember the spoof of the movie, it wasn't taken from somebody named Abby Normal. It was a normal human brain, and the creature was innocent, and it was good. It had love. It wanted to love. But over time, by watching the behavior of the humans around it, he learned through their rejection of him what he interpreted to be human. Because he was treated cruelly. He was never given a name, not even by his creator. He was called throughout the book monster, creature, hideous, slave, fiend, demon, wretch. All kinds of negative terms. He was never once referred to by anything or by anybody except one person in an uplifting or positive way. In the book, after he runs away, he befriends a family in a farmhouse, and the father of the family was blind and could not see him. He was the only person who treated him as a human being. There's a part in the book that's very moving where the creature tries to endear himself to his creator, and he tells him, I am the Adam of your labors. Why do you treat me like this? But the doctor cannot get over the appearance of the creature, and he is so repulsed that the words fall on deaf ears. As depicted by Mary Shelly, the creature is sensitive, emotional, and only wants really one thing, He wants to be able to share his life with another sentient being like himself. He was intelligent. By the time the creature was 2 years old, he had read all the great classics, Paradise Lost, Plutarch's Lives. He is fluent in 2 languages, English and French. But because of his looks, and only because of his looks, he is rejected by everyone he meets, until finally he rejects himself. Ultimately, the real monster in the book is not the creature. It is Dr. Frankenstein and those people around him. By the very way that he views his creation, he turns it against him. And the creature begs him to create another being like him that he can give love to and receive love from. And it's important that the first thing he says is, in this conversation, is, I want somebody to love. Not somebody to love me, I want somebody to love. And then he says, and to love me back. But eventually he turns against his creator. And he threatens him. He says, if you don't give me somebody to love, I'm going to destroy everything you love. That is what the absence of love can do. It can take something that is good and pure and innocent and turn it to something that is not. Wonder how different the story would have been if people had loved him the way he was. You know, in Unity we say, God and I love you just the way you are. Sometimes that's not always so easy to do, is it? But it's what we are called to do. You know, there's been so much research about the power and the need for love. We know that children in orphanages, even when every single physical need is met, suffer emotionally and developmentally from a lack of love. But what has only recently been realized is that it's not so much the lack of receiving love that harms the children in these orphanages. It is the lack of someone to give love to. Some studies are showing that what may be even more impactful to human development, the physical development, the emotional development, the spiritual development, cultural development, is the ability to give love as well as receive love. And there can be no doubt that we are right now living in a time and a place where love isn't being given so well. And yet, so many people are crying out for love. We have created a monstrous experience in our world. How do we redeem ourselves? How do we rewrite the story so that instead of seeing the appearance of ugliness, we see the beauty that lies beneath the appearance? How do we rekindle the energies of love and acceptance? Well, we must begin by realizing one thing, that we have created this. We are Dr. Frankenstein, but we have the power to rewrite the ending of the story. So from this moment on in this lesson today, I am not speaking just about the story. I am speaking about our story. And I am not just speaking about our personal development and our personal experience. I am speaking about our development and experience as a culture, as a people, as a nation, and as a species. I am speaking in the macro and the micro. So take this on those levels. I am speaking about healing, acceptance, and love for our cultures, our nations, our species, and us as individuals. I guess probably the best place to begin is what Jesus said about love. Because we profess to be students of the teacher, Jesus. And whether we see Jesus as a teacher, a Messiah, a Savior, his teachings never change. They are universal. And there is something he said that I want you to really think about. He said, by this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Now, I'm just going to comment on that word disciples because it's been somewhat misused. We think of the disciples as only those who either were with Jesus while he was teaching, or those of us who profess to be Christians. The word disciple means anybody who is a student. So anybody who strives to learn the deeper teachings of the great masters, of which Jesus was one. We are the students. And if we are going to be the students, then we will be known by one thing and one thing only: how we love one another. That verse in Scripture is tremendously important at this moment in history. In another part of the Bible, we find almost the same thing written by John, where he wrote, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. And everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. And those who do not know love do not know God, for God is love." If we are going to say we love God, and there's a lot of people running around the world today saying you must love God, or I love God. But if you don't love everyone else, you don't love God. Pure and simple. There's no getting around that. The only way to love God is to love everyone else. To love one another. No exceptions. Because the basic attribute of God is love. In 1 Corinthians, we have a description of a man who struggles with this, like so many of us do in this time. I know it's hard to love everybody we see today. Just get on Facebook and tell me you love everybody. It's tough. I can't profess I do it well either, all the time. There was a man who wrote a letter to the Corinthians who struggled with this too. And he wrote this: "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but if I don't have love, I am less than a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal." Well, what does that mean? What it means? Well, let me put it into some modern words. Let me rephrase it. If I could speak with the skill and the oratory powers of William Jennings Bryan, or the cryptic language of Winston Churchill, or the power of President Roosevelt, which he swayed an entire nation, or if I could sing opera like Enrico Caruso, suppose I had 1,000 tongues that could speak 1,000 languages at all times, but I don't have love, what's the point? The Bible says I am nothing. And unless I have the divine love that God has, I am nothing. He goes on to write, "Though I have the gift of prophecy, and I understand all mysteries and have all knowledge, but I don't have love, I am nothing." I could be a man of tremendous knowledge. I could be like Charles Fillmore. I could understand all metaphysics and all the mysteries and all of history and put all of the patterns together. I could know and quote the Bible from one end to the other, chapter and verse. But if I don't have love, what's the point? You know, I know there are people in this country who are conservative and liberal, and they are conservative and liberal in their theology. Some think unity is way out there, woo-woo, blasphemy, what have you. Others say, wow, that's what I've been looking for. But if there is not love, what's the point? If we in unity don't have the love, what's the point? There are people who are contending for the inspiration of the Bible, yet don't see the love that is contained therein. You know, I might know the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, but if I don't have love, big deal. Big whoop. What's the point? I might be a man of great faith, but if I have faith so that I can move a mountain from one place to another, if I could move a mountain from the Ozarks and cast it into Shoal Creek, whoopee, yeah, it's amazing, but so what? What have I accomplished if I don't have love? I could be a person of great charity and bestow all my goods to feed the poor, but if I don't have love, what's the point? Unless I have the divine love that God gives, that God is, there really is no point in doing these things. You know, we have been a nation that has always kind of prided itself on helping others all around the world. And we've kind of stopped doing that. And one of the reasons we've stopped doing that is we have said as a nation, well, they don't give anything back to me. We were giving amiss, if that is our intention. There was not love behind our giving, if that was the reason we did it. Love says we give because we care and we expect nothing in return. Love gives because it says, I give so that life may be increased, so that love may be increased, so that peace will be increased. Nothing else. I expect nothing back for myself. Love allows us to be not easily provoked or touchy or irritable. You know, I read a study, I don't remember who said it, but he said, if people have to handle you with kid gloves and have to be careful about what they say to you or around you, then you know nothing about love. You don't know what God is talking about. What has happened? What has happened? What have we created as a people and as individuals? We've created a land that has the potential to be a land of love and acceptance. And instead we have created a monster. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because the monster is reflecting back to us the shadow. The monster in Frankenstein reflected the doctor's personality back to him. And he had a choice. What if he had embraced the shadow? What if he had really seen it and said, that is who I am. That is what I need to heal. We've created a monster. Is it too late to show it love? No, it is not. That is the beauty of this. We have the opportunity to rewrite the story. Charles Fillmore wrote this in Keep a True Lent. A good definition of love is the feeling that if all people would recognize love as embodying the ideal that God is, the ideal that God loves all people, that God has poured out life and substance and intelligence equally within us in the universal scheme, we would find in that realization the solution to every problem in life. Our greatest good comes in the welfare of all. I think that's something we have forgotten. Our greatest good comes in the welfare of all. Charles wasn't the only one who said that. Margaret Ponders wrote this in Laws of Love. Love is the knowledge that every person has the Spirit of God within them, just as we do, and deserves our respect and the freedom to express the Spirit in their own unique way. The awareness of that Spirit of God connects us all in love, because the essence of God is love. So, as I said, it's simply not possible to love God without loving others. And it is simply not possible to experience love without giving love. Giving love to yourself, to your neighbor, to the other. And in turn, loving what has been created. Loving what you have created, what we have created. Love is as critical for the mind and body as oxygen is. It's essential for healthy societies. It's not negotiable. The more connected every one of us in our culture, in our society, in our nation, in our world is, the healthier we will be, both metaphysically and physically, emotionally and spiritually. And the less connected we are, the more at risk we are. You know, it's also true that the less love you have and give, the more depressed you are in life. There's actual studies about that. Not giving love can cause depression just as effectively as not receiving love, maybe even more so. I think it's safe to say that, you know, one of the things that we're seeing in studies now is that the United States is one of the most depressed nations on earth. Why is that? Why is that? And that's according to its own citizens. And it's interesting also that these same studies have shown that the happiest nations on earth, some of them are the ones that are the highest taxed. Now, there are people who would say, well, that doesn't make sense. The nations that are the highest taxed are made up of people who care the most about the welfare of all, who really care that everybody in their land is safe, is provided for, can live a good life. Why? Because they are dedicated to the greater good. So love is probably the best antidepressant there is, because one of the most common forms or sources of depression is feeling unloved. And if there is any part of a family, a community, or a nation that feels unloved, it impacts the entire family, community, and nation. In the book, Victor Frankenstein had never known really love himself, and he could not give love to his creation. And it spread out from the castle. It spread out into the village and out into the lands, and it actually spread it in the book all across Europe and even to the Americas. Fear, pain, anger, hatred, revulsion. It started in one place in the book. That's how powerful these energies are that we work with. There's a mythology in our culture that love just happens. And as a result, most people sit around waiting for someone to love them. You know, there's even songs, how I wish I had someone to love me. How many songs are there about how I wish I had someone to love? There's a couple. There are. But the mythology is that love just happens. But love doesn't really work that way. To get love and to keep love, we have to go out and be active and learn a variety of specific skills about love. Where do we learn love? Well, most of us get our ideas of love from pop culture, from movies, from songs, from memes and Facebook. We come to believe is that love, it just comes out of nowhere and sweeps us off our feet. But that ideal of love creates unrealistic images for entertainment. And it's one reason, I think, why we have such a lack of it in our world right now. It's a part of our national experience. We've forgotten where to find love. In churches right now, right at this moment, on this day, there are preachers talking about love. The love of Jesus, the love of God. But it's always, well, not always. There's other unity churches and people like us, but too often it's about love that if you pray right, or you sit right, or you belong to the right church, or you believe the right way, then God will love you. Then Jesus will love you. Instead of that love is all around us, waiting to be given forth from us, from within us. Part of our national vulnerability is it's like eating junk food. We're constantly stimulated by images of instant gratification. And we think it is love when it's simply nothing more than distraction and infatuation. One consequence of this is that when we are immersed in real love, we don't know how to handle it. We become upset and disappointed because there are many things that don't fit this cultural pop idea of what love is. Some people get demanding and controlling, wanting someone else or others to be just like we are because they think that's what love is. Everybody to be exactly the same, without realizing the ideal has been misplaced. We're seeing that. We're seeing it especially in white America, where we have this cultural idea that everyone has to look, talk, act, behave, and love just as we think they should, just like we do, just like everyone who met Frankenstein's creation thought. And we see how well that idea of love worked and is working. But things are changing. Things are changing. It's not only possible, but it is necessary to change our approach to love, to ward off depression, to ward off fear, to ward off all those negative things we don't want in our lives anymore. There's some strategies that you can use to get rid of this national, societal, emotional depression that we are experiencing as a culture. The first is to recognize the difference between limerence and love. Limerence is a word that you don't hear very much. Maybe some healthcare professionals know it. I bet Novella knows it. But it means it's a psychological state of deep infatuation. And we get infatuated with people who pop on the screens and pop up in media and pop up in our leadership, who are powerful and we think successful and all of this. And a large percentage of us become infatuated with that. But it rarely lasts. Victor Frankenstein was infatuated with the idea that he could create a being that was everything he was not. But it didn't last. We know that love is a learned skill, not something that comes just from hormones or emotion. Erich Fromm called love an act of will. And he wrote, if you don't learn the skills of love, you guarantee that you will be depressed. Not only because you will not be connected, but because you will have many failure experiences. So how do we change this? How do we change it as a people and as individuals? How do we do what Victor Frankenstein was not able to do? The first, we learn good communication skills, because they are the means by which we can develop and trust. We learn to communicate with those who are different than us, who see things differently, who experience life differently, who have a different worldview, a different lens. Because the more we can communicate, the less depressed we become, the more open we become, the more empathetic we can become. And I will just note here that Facebook is not a communication tool that allows for this. It really isn't. Nothing against anybody who is on Facebook right now. I am so glad you are with us. But to really have a deep conversation, we need to have it nose to nose. And right now, I know our noses have to be 6 feet apart at least, but still. The best communication comes in speaking, in being with one another. And if we can't speak, in person, speak over the phone. Or maybe over through Zoom or some of the other things. But don't try to do it through memes. It doesn't work well. Social media is almost never about good communication. It's about saying what you think everybody else should believe. There are always going to be core differences between two people, between groups of people, between cultures. And no matter how good or close we may be, those differences will surface and should surface. Because those differences are what give us color, what give us opportunity to grow from one another. And that's one of the big challenges of differences. It's part of what that book Frankenstein was about differences. Differences can separate us, or they can cause us to see things differently, to understand in new ways. Those core differences need to be on the surface. They need to be seen. They need to be embraced. They need to be understood. Because the issue about them that comes up with them is to identify and maybe incorporate them so that we can become more than we have been. We're seeing a lot of relationships killed in families. I see families that are breaking up over the differences that have come to the surface, differences of race. Oh my gosh, the ripping apart of our culture over race just breaks my heart. Over politics, over economics, over who's right and who's wrong, over families and communities and nations. It's from a lack of understanding where others are coming from, what their view is. But when we can learn to speak with one another coherently, intelligently, and gently, and listen to one another with our hearts, then those differences become gifts. rather than monsters. We can learn to focus on the other person rather than focus on what we are getting or not getting, how we are being treated or not treated. We can see what other people's needs are, not just their physical needs. But what is it a person who is different from us, who has different ideas than we do, really needing? What do they really need for their own well-being, for their own sense of safety? It's a tough skill. It's a tough skill to learn in a culture that is mostly narcissistic. I mean, our leaders are exhibiting narcissistic behavior. And our leaders are but a reflection of us as a people. It's important that we remember that. They are reflecting back to us the monster that is within. And that monster can be a good thing. Maybe we need to redefine what that word means. Maybe the monsters are the big, ugly, scary things that yet have love and crave love and want to give love. We have to develop the skill to accommodate multiple realities. Well, that's a really tall order, to accommodate multiple realities, to understand that there are more than just our own personal reality, that every single human being on this planet has their own reality, and it is just as real and vital and important as ours is. What is the reality of a person of color? What is the reality of a white supremacist? What are they really saying? What are they really needing? Depressed people only think in their own reality. They can't open to others' realities. That's what the story of Frankenstein is about. The different realities that are within each and every one of us. The creature, as I said, was a creation of Dr. Frankenstein. It was an extension of him. It was a reflection of him. It was a manifestation of his own self-loathing, his own low self-image, and the unmet needs he had. And in the end, because he could not embrace it, both him and the creature end up dying, with neither one of them ever getting their needs met. They literally destroyed each other. The story of our nation, of our culture, of our people doesn't have to meet that same end if we are willing to be different. There's an old saying, and it's been attributed to many people. Nobody knows who really said it first, but it's this: observe the masses and do the opposite. Observe the masses and do the opposite. In Romans, Paul said this: don't copy the behavior and customs of the world. Let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. David, way back in the Psalms, wrote this very first one, Psalm 1, verse 1. Oh, the joys of those who do not follow this advice of the wicked, or those who stand around with sinners, or join in with the mockers. He's being a little sarcastic there. What joy do we seek? What joy do we seek? Do we join in with those who are following the masses? Or do we dare to speak differently, to be different, to act differently? This isn't just a Christian idea. The Buddha said this: judge nothing and you will be happy. Forgive everything and you will be happier. Love everything and you will be the happiest. See beauty in everyone and everything, and you will be at peace. What would have happened if Frankenstein's creation was a thing of beauty? Well, there still would have been that shadow side that would have eventually surfaced one way or another to be healed. What if the doctor could have looked past the appearance of his creation and found the beauty of its heart? What if that creature would have been accepted by the people of the community in spite of its physical appearance? What will happen when we, as a people, as individuals, and as a nation, once again can look past color, economic status, ethnicity, national origin, gender identity, sexual identity, and instead see ourselves reflected back at us? We would become a compassionate, loving people. I heard a story yesterday that I'm going to close with. It doesn't exactly fit this, but it was such a moving and powerful story from a fellow Unity student that I went through school with that I had to share it. I had to include it. It's a true story. It goes like this. I was at the corner grocery store buying some early potatoes, and I noticed a small child, delicate of bone and feature, ragged but clean, hungrily appraising a basket of freshly picked green peas. This was obviously some time ago. I paid for my groceries, but was drawn to the display of these peas, and I am a pushover for cream peas and new potatoes, and pondering them I couldn't help overhearing the conversation between the owner of the store, Mr. Miller, and the ragged boy next to me. He said, "Hi, Barry, how are you today?" "Hello, Mr. Miller, I'm fine, thank you. I'm just admiring those peas. They sure do look good." "Well, they are good, Barry. How's your ma?" "Well, she's getting stronger all the time." "Oh, that's good. Anything I can help you with?" "No, just admiring the peas." "Would you like to take some home?" Mr. Miller asked. "No, I got nothing to pay for them with." "Well, what have you got you would trade me for some of those peas?" "Well, sir, all I've got is my prize marble here." "Really? I love marbles. Let me see it." "Well, here she is. She's a beauty." "I can see that. Darn, the only thing is this one is red. I like blue." I'm sorry, I got that backwards. "That one is blue. I really like red. Do you have a red one like this at home?" "Well, yeah, I think I do." "Well, I'll tell you what, take this sack of peas home with you, and the next time you're here, bring that red one by, and I'll trade you." "Okay, I sure will. Thank you, Mr. Miller." Well, the Mrs. Miller, who had been standing nearby, came over to help me, and with a smile she said, "There are 2 other kids like him in our community, and all 3 of them are in very poor circumstances, and Jim just loves to bargain with them for peas, apples, tomatoes, or whatever they come for. And he always tells them come back with their red marbles, and they always do. And when they get here, he decides he doesn't really want a red marble. He wants a green marble or an orange one or something else, and he sends them home with another bag of groceries, telling them to bring back another color marble the next time." Well, eventually I moved away from that town, and years went by, and life happened, and not too long ago I had occasion to visit the community. And while there, I had learned that Mr. Miller died. Excuse me. And they were having his visitation that evening. And knowing that all of my friends in the town would be there, I decided to go as well. And as I was sitting there and people were filing by the casket, I saw 3 young men file by. They walked up to the casket, and they gently placed something inside the casket, and then they gave Mrs. Miller a hug and said a few words and went on. They were fine-looking young men. 2 of them were wearing suits. One was wearing a military uniform. I could tell they had come far in life. Eventually, I went up to Mrs. Miller to pay my respects, and I mentioned the young men, and she said, yes, those were the kids. And then I went up to the casket, and Mrs. Miller showed me what was in her husband's hands, 3 shiny red marbles. And she said to me, "We never had much either. We barely got by. But I know that Jim was the richest man in this part of the world. And right now, he is richer than he ever was before." That is how powerful love is. The simplest thing can change the world. Mr. Miller and his wife looked at those 3 kids. They weren't well kept. They were raggedy. They were probably dirty. But they saw beyond the appearances. and they gave of their hearts. And it changed their lives and the lives of who knows who else. Who knows who was touched. Their legacy changed the lives of people around them. What kind of legacy are we leaving? Are we creating a monster? Or a creation that, while maybe not perfect, is nonetheless love-giving and love-receiving? Are we creating a world of compassion, acceptance, community, brotherhood and sisterhood? Because by what we create, by how we show up to one another, people will know that we are the disciples of God, because we love one another. Namaste.